where we're going to break down the core principles of the legendary investor Ray Dalio. We're going to dive into his guide on how money, wealth, and really the world itself actually works. So you might think one of the most successful investors in history got his start in some fancy boardroom, right? Nope. It all started for him right on a golf course. Get this, at just 12 years old, Dalio was working as a caddy. He took the tips he made and bought his very first stock in a company called Northeast Airlines. And why that company? Well, simply because it was the only one he'd heard of that was trading for under $5 a share. Now, here's the crazy part. That company was actually on the verge of going bankrupt. But in an absolute stroke of luck, another company bought it out. And just like that, Dalio's investment tripled. That single trade lit a fire in him, and it started a lifelong passion for what he calls the game, an amazing game that if you play it well, pays you money. And playing that game taught Dalio something absolutely critical, something most of us get wrong all the time, the massive difference between having wealth and having money. Dalio argues that we're constantly mixing these two things up. And look, it might sound like a simple distinction, but understanding it is totally fundamental if you want to see how economies, and especially economic bubbles, really work. So what's the real difference here? Well, think of it like this. Wealth is what you think something is worth. You know, your stock portfolio, the valuation of some hot new tech startup. But money is the actual tool you use to buy a cup of coffee. One is just a perception of value, the other actually settles the bill. So just how out of whack is this balance today? Well, Dalio's calculation is that for every $1 of actual money in the United States, there's about $8.50 of perceived wealth. Now, to put that into perspective for you, that's the same level it was at right before the huge market crashes of 1929 and 2000. And that right there is the crucial point. This creates a massive vulnerability. All that wealth is basically just an idea until someone sells it for cold, hard cash. If a panic kicks in and everyone rushes for the exit at the same time, trying to turn their stocks into dollars, well, there just isn't enough money to go around. And that is how bubbles pop. So this leads us to the next really big question. If all this perceived wealth is so fragile, what does Dalio even consider to be real money? His answer is pretty eye-opening. He says that when you hold a currency like the US dollar, you're not actually holding a hard asset. You're holding a debt instrument. It's basically an IOU from a government. And if you look at history, governments have a really bad habit of printing way too much of it. So let's just look at the trade-offs here. Fiat currency, like the dollar, is built on a promise, which means it carries credit risk. Bitcoin is based on digital scarcity, but gold is unique. It's a physical asset that isn't also someone else's debt. It's the only one of these three that you can hold in your hand that doesn't depend on someone else's promise to be good for it. Okay, so understanding the nature of money is just one piece of this giant puzzle. Dalio actually fits this concept into a much bigger framework that he uses to make sense of these huge shifts we see happening around the world. He calls them history's 5 big forces. He argues that you can understand almost every major event by looking at the interplay of these 5 massive repeating forces. You've got the debt and money cycle we've been talking about, then there's internal political conflict inside countries, then the rise and fall of global powers, the impact of technology, and finally, acts of nature like pandemics or climate change. The key is they don't happen in a vacuum. They all feed off each other, creating the big cycles that shape our world. All right, so you're faced with these huge global cycles and this idea of fragile wealth. What is Dalio's practical advice for an ambitious person trying to make their way today? His number one piece of advice is so simple, it's brilliant. He says, stop just thinking about it and start doing it. You have to actually get in the arena and play the game, even if you're starting small. And this can be anything, right? Investing your first $100, starting a tiny little business on the side. The whole point is that hands-on learning, where you have actual skin in the game, that's what builds real knowledge. It's what builds intuition. And you don't have to figure it all out on your own. He really stresses how incredibly valuable it is to find mentors and build a community of smart people who are a few steps ahead of you. Their experience can just radically speed up your own learning curve. So ultimately, when you boil it all down, Dalio's keys to success are really about a mindset. It's about being relentlessly curious, trying to understand how things really work. It's about having the self-awareness to know what path actually fits your nature, and above all else, it's understanding that the best investment you can ever make is in yourself. Dalio's incredible journey started with a single, simple bet on a stock he knew pretty much nothing about. It was an imperfect start, but it was a start. And that really brings us to the final and most important question of this whole explainer.